pond was the kind that kept secrets under its lily pads. Dawn mist braided itself through willow branches and drifted low like a whisper that didn't want to wake the cattails. Dragonflies sketched quick blue lines across the surface and vanished. Minnows drew silver commas in the shadows. If you stood very still, you could hear the soft clink of snails tapping the underside of a pebble, the far-off beat of woodpecker drums, and the sleepy murmur of water slipping past old roots. In that quiet place where the world often forgot to hurry lived a little frog named Hoppy. He was the spring green of new grass and the pluck and bounce of a raindrop. He could sit still for exactly 3 heartbeats before his toes twitched to leap again. On mornings when mist wore the pond like a shawl, Hoppy would climb his favorite rock, the one sun warmed first, and watch the swans arrive, pale as clouds and somehow twice as grand. They glided across the water with such calm that Hoppy often held his breath, afraid even the smallest exhale might ripple the scene and break their magic. "I'm not beautiful like a swan and I can't fly," he would croak quietly to himself. "I am just Hoppy the frog." On a certain afternoon when the sky wore a blue so bright it looked newly painted, Hoppy sighed this to nobody and everybody. The sigh rose and fell, then drifted to the ear of an old turtle whose shell had collected more sunrises than any rock on the bank. Turtle lifted his wrinkled head, the slow motion of a leaf deciding to float again. "Little frog," the turtle called, voice low and round as a drum underwater. "Why does your breath sound like it forgot to be a song?" Hoppy startled, then cleared his throat. "Oh, I'm fine, sir. Just thinking." "Thinking is fine," the turtle said, paddling closer. "Unless you let it nibble holes in your happiness." "Thinking does that sometimes." Hoppy's chest felt like a small pond itself, rippling from the turtle's attention. He glanced at the swans, at their swan necks drawing elegant questions in the air. "Look at them," he murmured, his gaze caught by the way sunlight painted their wings. "They are graceful and smart. So calm. So sure. I can only hop around. I must be useless." Turtle blinked very slowly. His eyelids met and parted with the patience of a long, patient thought. "Useless? That's a mighty word for a little frog. Have you tried it on? Does it fit?" Hoppy flushed a shade greener. "It feels true." The turtle studied him. "Do you see how high the swans soar? They cannot dive deep the way you can. Do you see them catching bugs mid-air with a flick of a tongue? I do not. Every creature cages a piece of wonder the others cannot hold." Hoppy shifted on the rock. "But their wonder looks bigger." "Only from far away," said the turtle, who had lived long enough to know that closeness tends to shrink the idea of impossible and enlarge the truth of yourself. "Why not take your wonder out for a walk and see what it does?" Hoppy frowned thoughtfully. He watched a pair of swans lift off, the whoosh of their wing beats like pages turning in a giant book. The sky seemed to open just for them. The frog's heart hopped against his ribs. Without another word, he bent his knees, inhaled, and leaped. For a breathless moment he sailed, not in the wide swan sweep of sky, but in his own fierce arc. The world tilted under him, bright paths like saucers of sunlight, dark pockets of cool where roots tangled, a single dragonfly pivoting mid-air as if to shout, "Did you see?" He cleared a ring of lilies that lay so tightly packed no bird could have slipped between them. The wind, surprised, patted his cheeks. He splashed down with a crisp kiss of water. The turtle's mouth tipped into a smile. "See," he said. "You leapt where they could only swim." Hoppy gulped a laugh he hadn't expected. The laugh turned into a ripple. The ripple grew into a feeling that filled his chest like warm light. He had thought of his hop as a small thing, a coin dropped in a deep well. The old turtle held it up, polished it, and suddenly it gleamed. "Try again," the turtle suggested, as if offering a second biscuit. Hoppy tried again. Then again. He tried until his legs trembled the way a leaf trembles when a songbird brushes by. Each time he flew for just a heartbeat, and each time the pond was different from up there, patterns he had never noticed, shadows with stories he wanted to learn, routes across the lily pads no heron foot could follow. Evening gathered like a shawl slipped over the pond's shoulders, and the swans tucked themselves into the hush. Frogs began their chorus, deep bass from the bullfrogs by the cattails, sharp chirps from the tiny chorus frogs hidden in grass. Fireflies winked on, one by one, as if stars had grown curious and come down to listen. Hoppy's legs were sore, but his heart hummed. He had not flown like a swan. He had flown like Hoppy. The next day, the day after that, and all the days that followed for a while, he practiced. If you had watched carefully, you would have seen the small improvements that add up to a miracle when nobody's counting. The way he correct at his angle to catch a wind sigh at the top of a hop, the way he learned to spot the glimmer of a dragonfly early and snatch it mid-dance, the way his dives became sleek enough to slide between weeds that earlier had said, "Not you." Hoppy's mornings had purpose now, and purpose makes the sun feel warmer and the world smell like possibility. Sometimes, when his legs burned, he'd rest beside the old turtle, who had taken to sharing the wisdom he stored in his shell. "Balance is not stillness," the turtle would say, eyes reflecting a sky split with swan wings. "It's the dance between now and next." Or, "Let your breath be your metronome." Or, with a soft chuckle, "Remember to celebrate the little wins, they are the crumbs that lead us to the feast." On an afternoon full of the rich green smell of growing things, a dragonfly hovered so close to Hoppy's nose that they almost were one creature. "Name's Zephyr," she buzzed, wings busy with sunlight. "Watched you jumping." It's like watching music make up its mind. Hoppy startled. I'm Hoppy." "Keep at it," Zephyr said, circling him 3 times for sheer pleasure. "You found your up." Hoppy didn't know you could find an up, but he liked the idea. He had never named his hopes before, and somehow knowing they were called up made them easier to reach. Spring thickened into summer the way a song gathers verses. The swans raised a cygnet, clumsy in its charm, who tripped over reeds and flapped so hard at the water it seemed the pond might wrinkle. The cygnet's parents didn't hide their pride, and Hoppy learned to smile for them without wishing to wear their feathers. The turtle napped more in the shade, and Zephyr visited with news a beaver had started a new dam at the far end. A raccoon had left handprints on the soft bank, looking like delicate flowers stamped in mud. One crushed blue evening, thunder rolled in slow as a drumline. The wind came with tired shoulders and lay its head against the willows. Hoppy tucked under his leaf roof, watching raindrops sew bright stitches across the surface. The swans gathered their cygnet into the sheltered narrow where reeds made a green wall. Old Turtle tucked into his shell like a home inside a home. Lightning stitched a quick river across the sky. Thunder answered. Pond thrilled with the ancient orchestra of storm. Hoppy loved storms, the clean taste of the air, the sound of everything washing itself new. He closed his eyes and listened. The windrose came at them sideways. Crack popped through the night, followed by a splash and a cry that was neither frog nor bird nor branch. Hoppy was moving before he thought about courage, because sometimes you remember you have wings only when the ground tilts. He leaped from pad to pad, rain needling his back. Cry came again, thin, frantic. The reed wall, he found the cygnet wedged in a net of fallen cattails. The wind had pushed a raft of uprooted plants against the little swan until it could not lift or turn. Parents swam frantic circles, their long necks hammering at the tangle, but their big bodies could not enter the tight weave without making a worse mess. "Hoppy," the mother called when she saw him. Her voice trembled with a fear too large for that small place. "He's trapped. We can't get in." Hoppy swallowed the part of him that wanted to be a swan because the part of him that was a frog knew exactly what to do. He dove. The water was brown with silt and torn roots. It tasted like old pennies and panic. He slid his body between stems, pressed and wriggled. His thighs burned. A reed blade nicked his cheek. He found the cygnet's foot, soft and frantic, and gave it a gentle push upward. The little body shifted some, but the tangle held. Hoppy surfaced, gulped wet air. "Old Tiller!" he shouted to the turtle, who was not far away. "Can you wedge that thick stem there, the one like a spear? Hold it up? Keep the mouth open." Turtle pushed through storm-chopped water, wedged the stem with the weight of time and patience. The gap widened a hair. Hoppy filled his chest with courage and lake and dove again. "Zephyr!" Hoppy called when he surfaced a second time, spitting taste of root. "Find the beavers. Tell them we need teeth and speed." Zephyr shimmered off, nothing but motion and intent. Hoppy dove again. His fingers worked like friends, tugging, twisting, easing. The cygnet's wing freed with a soft, soggy sigh. Hoppy's lungs burned, but his heart said just one more. He surfaced, caught the old turtle's eye. The turtle's small nod put strength in Hoppy's legs. By the time Zephyr returned, towing a V of sleek wet shapes with bright eyes, Hoppy had loosened enough of the tangle that the beavers could do what they did best: snip, strip, carve the problem into pieces that no longer fit together into fear. The wind thunked one last insult against the reeds, and then, as quickly as the wild decides it's had its say, the storm finished. Silence took a long breath. The cygnet, freed at last, bobbed out and then sank into the crook of his mother's wing, all tremble and tears, alive, alive, alive. The swans turned their elegant heads toward Hoppy. For a heartbeat he felt small again, like a freckle on the great body of the pond. But the mother swan lowered her neck until her beak brushed Hoppy's forehead. "Thank you," she said with a seriousness that wrapped itself around his bones and warmed them. "You went where we could not." Hoppy, who had always thought being a frog was a smaller kind of being, felt something enormous bloom inside him that had nothing to do with size. The bloom had the shape of belonging. After the storm, the pond shone. Doe-eyed water striders returned to skate their paths. The beavers, having tasted work and liked it, continued to reshape the far end, making quiet cities out of sticks. The swans preened. The old turtle basked as if the sun had poured itself just for him. Hoppy jumped, but not to chase the idea of being something else. He jumped for the joy of feeling the pond's breath under his toes. Not every day brought a storm or a rescue. Most days were made of small things. Hoppy delivered floating petals to a shy tadpole who believed they were boats. He helped a beetle flip itself over and learned in the process that patience and gentle hands could do more than a stampede of effort. He raced Zephyr's shadow across a morning and learned the limits of chasing light. He listened to the old turtle stories, the time the river tried to borrow the pond and the day snow fell so softly it stitched the world shut, and learned that comfort lived wherever a story had roots. Once, when the sun hung low and lemony over the far trees, Hoppy fumbled a leap. It was nothing. He simply misjudged, went long when he needed short, and slid into a slick of algae. He would have laughed, except a sleek ribbon moved there in the green, and the ribbon had eyes that gleamed like polished coins. Snake. Hoppy's breath went coin small. He flattened himself against the pad's edge, heart drumming too loud for such a tinderbox of a moment. The snake's tongue flicked. Tasted fear and curiosity. "Hoppy," came a tiny voice tucked under another leaf. Pip, a young frog with a speckled back and a squeak of a croak, peered out with eyes that said both "don't move" and "save me." Hoppy's blood turned river cold. But training is a map you draw into your muscles for exactly these moments when your mind loses its way. He did not leap away. He leaped into the open water directly across the snake's path, a bright flash of green, a living lure, a distraction the size of only himself but bright enough to tilt a predator's plan. The snake turned. Hoppy flicked right. The snake flicked right. Hoppy went left, fast, then up, then down, never in the rhythm of a frog who had only learned to be afraid. He led the snake across a web of pads where the stems rose tight. His kind knew the map. The snake did not. As Hoppy zipped between two pads so close they brushed his hips, the snake lunged and struck a stem hard, surprised into stillness. Hoppy skipped 3 pads, then dove deep and kicked, green lightning under the surface. He surfaced beneath a leaf 2 stones away, then crept, slow as a cloud, back toward Pip. The young frog wobbled, then burst into trembling sobs that made his whole round body jostle. "You're okay," Hoppy whispered, his own heart still fast as wings. "See? Still you." That evening the frogs sang louder. They made a little song while the first stars fetched themselves into the sky. Hoppy, Hoppy, quick as the rain, leaps like a whisper, a skip, a refrain. The swans added a low hum. Zephyr traced a figure 8 above his head. The old turtle lifted his face, looked at the moon, and looked at Hoppy, the soft way one does when a lesson proves itself with life. Summer tipped itself into a different shape one week, the way a loaf of bread changes once you slice into it. The water level fell. The hot sky pressed down like a hand on a book, trying to keep the pages from flipping. The beaver's dam slowed water to a yawn. Tadpoles found themselves in shrinking puddles stitched to shore, the kind that rewrite a life in an afternoon if nobody pays attention. Hoppy did not want his pond to rewrite itself without him. He leaped from pool to pool with a band of frogs at his heels, and together they did very small things in very large numbers, pushing pebbles to deepen a trickle, coaxing leaves to lie in a line to shade a path, carrying mouthfuls of water from one cup to another until the cups connected in a thin shining thread. They asked the swans to drag their feet just so in the shallows to keep channels open. They asked the beavers to carve small gates in their dam to share a little more with the thirsty side. They asked the old turtle to sit in the hottest stretch and be a shadow for the littlest fish. It was not elegant. It was messy and splotched with mud and full of wrong tries that showed them how to get to the right one. But afternoons later, when the sky finally uncurled a fist of rain over everything, the pond's edges breathed again. The littlest tadpoles, now not trapped but launched, wriggled into new water with the excitement of children let out for recess. The swans sought out Hoppy. "You charted paths for water, Father Swan said, sounding baffled by a kind of magic he'd never thought to try. Hoppy shrugged. "It's what frogs do best," he said, and then, because it felt good, "it's what this frog does best." "Proud of you," Zephyr trilled. "You turned a puddle into a plan." Autumn arrived shyly, with a single red leaf that drifted down and spun on a ripple as if to demonstrate grace. Chorus frog songs thinned. Mornings tasted like metal and apples. Hoppy stood on his favorite rock and watched the swans practice long flights, the kind that stretch the horizon until edges blur. He felt the old longing again, like the echo of a song he'd loved before he understood its words. But he did not want their flight anymore. He wanted their courage, and he had found his version of it. The swans rose one morning, a white unraveling in the sky, and the pond suddenly looked like a sweater missing its buttons. Hoppy watched until his neck hurt. The old turtle climbed beside him. "Ah," said the turtle. "The world always remembers to be itself eventually. We must learn to love it either way." "I will miss them," Hoppy said. "You can miss," said the turtle, "and still be whole." They sat together until the sky shrank into a tidy blue. Hoppy cleared his throat, shy with a question that had grown big inside him. "Tiller, do you ever wish you were not a turtle?" The old one laughed, a sound that had more moss than rock in it. "Oh, once. I thought it would be something to be a kingfisher. Bright as a candy. Fast as an idea. But would a kingfisher carry its house on its back? No. And where would it be in a winter storm? The reed that holds asks for a different kind of strength. Each of us is a question the world asked itself, and the answer was our name." Hoppy rolled that through his mind. The world had asked a question that only Hoppy could answer by being Hoppy. He liked that. Winter built itself carefully. Ice embroidered the edges of the pond. Hoppy found places where the water still whispered and learned how to sleep with one eye open for beauty. Zephyr, whose wings didn't care for cold, visited only on days when sunlight had muscle. The beavers grew fat as gratitude. Turtle became a slow pause in the mud. At night, under stars that seemed both closer and farther away, Hoppy practiced small leaps across patches of snow-dusted grass. He liked the squeak under his toes. He liked knowing that muscles, kept alive with attention, would be ready when spring knocked. Sometimes he sang to himself, quiet little songs that folded his worries like laundry and put them away in his heart's drawers. You are what you practice. You practice what you love. Leap small and often. The sky sees you above. When the ice finally let go, sound like 1,000 tiny bells, everything felt possible again. Spring returned with its basket of greens and sounds and the wild, impatient energy of beginning. Swans rode the blue down out of winter with their new stories tucked beneath their wings. Tadpoles scribbled youth across the shallows. Zephyr arrived, late by 2 mornings and smug about it. "I visited the big river and raced a swallow," she bragged, then eyed Hoppy. "Jugot taller." "Only in my heart," Hoppy said, and knew it was true. The frogs planned a festival because that's what joy does when it grows too big. They called it the Night of Small Greatness, because the turtle had said once that small and great were the same size when you held them up to the right kind of light. Everyone was to bring what they did best. No envy. No apology. Just the brightness each could carry. The beavers built a stage from lilies strung together with reeds, sturdy enough to make even the turtle trust it. The swans rehearsed a glide that would carve a white crescent across moonlight. Fireflies practiced their timings. The heron, grumpy but secretly soft, agreed to stand like a statue on the far bank, painting the night with his silhouette. The minnows promised to glitter in the shallows when the moon rose to tilt her face. When the night came, the pond wore its best dark, the kind that lets light be bright. The first act was the wind, who arrived without invitation and swirled through willow leaves like hands through beads. Then the dragonflies wrote poems in the air no one could read but everyone felt. Then the frogs leaped. Hoppy stood at the edge of the lily stage. His friends, Pip now bigger, Lily with her spots like stars, Bloop who always arrived late, lined up, knees bent, eyes bright. They did not want to look like swans or herons or kingfishers. They wanted to look like the answer to the question the world asked when it made them. Ready, Hoppy whispered. Ready, they whispered back, and the frog choir hummed a note so low it felt like the bottom of a lake under a mountain under a sky. They launched. Not high as swans. Not far as rumors. But precise, graceful in a mathematical way, arcs that met arcs, lines that curved into designs that glowed because Hoppy had discovered something new in a winter twilight when he had watched the way currents moved. He had found in a cove near the beaver city a bloom of algae that woke with a kiss, and lit like tiny lanterns. He had brought it gently to the lily stage and learned how to make it shimmer with a well-timed slap. Now, as the frog's feet touched down together, soft, respectful of the pad's patience, the algae winked on in patterns that turned the stage into a star map. Oh, went the pond as one body. The swan's eyes widened. The heron forgot to look bored. Zephyr made a sound that meant she wished she was a frog just for that one leap. Hoppy's heart felt too big and just right all at once. He led them through a pattern he had dreamed in a nap, swirls and spirals like the inside of a shell, then a big circle with a smaller circle inside it, then a zigzag that made the minnows flick their tails into a giggle of light. The end they formed for just a breath, the shape of a swan wing, and then dissolved it into a frog footprint, the two images kissing like old friends who know the truth of each other. The pond erupted in the kind of applause you can only hear if you're part of it, ripples clapping shorelines, leaves clapping each other, fish clapping fins on water, the moon clapping her light on everything that deserved it. The swans took their turn after, a glide so smooth it made the night slick with awe. The beavers slapped the water in approval. The old turtle lifted his head, his eyes shiny. When the festival ended, and the pond slowly took off its sparkle, Hoppy sat on his rock with his legs dangling into the cool. The old turtle joined him, moving slowly as always and exactly on time. That, said the turtle, was a good use of a day. Hoppy laughed. It was. You've learned, the turtle said. Hoppy didn't need to ask, learned what? He knew. He had learned to hold himself open to wonder, to practice a thing until it became not just what he did, but who he was. He had learned that envy shrinks your world to the size of what you are not, and gratitude enlarges it to the size of what you are. I used to think being a frog was smaller, Hoppy admitted softly. And now I think it's exactly my size. A soft splashing announced Pip, who clambered onto the rock, breathless. Hoppy, he panted. When I watch you, I think maybe I'm allowed to be like me. Hoppy's chest filled with something as big as the pond. He reached out and tapped Pip's head. Good, he said simply. Good. Seasons turn the way pages do, with edges sometimes sharp enough to cut you and sometimes soft enough not to notice until you've finished a chapter. Hoppy grew thick-legged and wise-eyed, the kind of frog young ones looked at and whispered, "Do you think he was ever brand new?" He laughed more. He listened more. He leaped whenever it felt like his soul needed to remember it had springs. The swans came and went, always with a nod for the frog who had once wanted their whiteness and found instead his own green. The old turtle lived and told stories and made naps into art. Zephyr never stopped narrating the sky. On a day when the light held itself like a breath before a laugh, Hoppy found his reflection trembling with wind and liked the way it wobbled. It meant the world was moving and he got to learn it all over again. And sometimes late at night when the stars bent low enough to kiss the pond and the crickets tuned their fiddles, Hoppy would tell a new frog the story of a little someone who thought he had to fly to be big and then learned that sometimes the best way up is through your own legs, your own lungs, your own name. The little ones listened with eyes wide and mouths round as moons. They looked at their feet like they'd never seen them before. They tried to hop. In the hush that follows a wish coming true, the pond held them all, a swan's echo, a turtle's patience, a dragonfly's quick laughter, a frog's leap mapped against the sky. The night smelled of wet earth and promises. And Hoppy, who had once wanted to be anything but himself, lay on his back on a lily pad and watched the moon travel, solemn and playful in equal measure. Thank you, he thought, to no one and everything. For the pond. For the leaping. For the way every creature carries a small, bright thing the rest of us need. Moral: everyone is unique, and our differences are where the world finds its balance. When you stop comparing your gifts to someone else's, you create room to grow into your own wonder. Practice what makes you you, and you'll find courage and purpose waiting in the familiar places you already know. Admire others but belong to yourself, and the pond will be better for it.